Electronic or digital literature is a genre created on and for digital devices. It is a work that can only exist in the digital space. Its elements cannot as easily be understood on the printed page. In the 1960s and 70s, with the introduction of the personal computer, people began expanding literature into the digital realm. I would like to suggest that each piece of electronic literature begins with an open starting point, trickling down, compressing as they progress, eventually reaching a turning point where the narrative or the meaning opens again. Our experience as observers dilates, expands, pools at the end. I offer the image of an hourglass to contextualize a relationship with time. We as readers are subject to the electronic literature creators' laws of governance, their initial conditions, their formulations and presets. Readings of hypertext are sustained by a pledge of meaningful resolution that appears to be anchored in the artifact or in its commerce. This is the contractual obligation presupposed by all narratives. An implicit question from the reader is directed to an other in possession of something, presumed to guarantee the convergence of the narrative's substance and signification. Moving onward, you have to have faith that you will return to a conclusion, guided by the voice of one who remembers where you have been and where you are going. That is just what Robert Kendall's poem asks of the reader. The kinetic poem Faith requires a few clicks to take the leap into a series of steps, as words reveal themselves on the screen, and meaning forms as faith and logic engage in both unification and separation. The two are injunction and disjunction. With each of the 5 clicks it takes to complete the poem, a new state mingles with the previous, and the conclusion becomes evident. You have to take a leap of faith without logic. As we get closer to the conclusion, our thoughts compress on a meaning, but time is then released as that meaning is not completely solidified by the poem's end. Our thoughts dilate to the possibilities. Kendall wrote in an article titled Time, the Final Frontier, that the way that the combinatorial textual possibilities of a hypertext solidify into a reading is similar to the way that a game of chess materializes from all the possible moves on a chessboard. The 3 stages of hypertext reading also bear similarities to the 3 stages of a chess game: opening, middle game, and end game, so it seems appropriate to adapt this chess terminology. The first note of a hypertext presents the reader with a limited number of options that are usually invariable from one reading to the next. Think of chess pieces all standing in their initial positions. The opening depends partly upon the work's design and partly upon the reader. The first note of Judy Malloy's Uncle Roger presents the reader with 3 options. Uncle Roger is a structure known as a narrabase or a narrative database, consisting of File 1, A Party in Woodside, File 2, The Blue Notebook, and File 3, Terminals. To open, the reader selects one of these files and is brought to forks that divert the narrative in a multitude of directions. File 1, we are introduced to the narrator Jenny, who moves from the East Coast to work as a babysitter for the Broadthrow family in Woodside, California. In this file, Jenny recounts the night after a party at the Broadthrows' home in a series of dreams and fragmented memories. Depending on the course of the observer's chosen clicks, a view of the party through Jenny's eyes emerges. In File 2, 5 fragmented narratives are woven around a formal birthday party. As Jenny sits at the party, other narrative threads flow through her mind. Some of the lexias are taken from Jenny's Blue Notebook, where reality and perception intermingle. As Jenny says herself, the things I wrote in the Blue Notebook didn't happen in exactly the way I wrote them. In File 3, Jenny sits at her desk and recounts memories of a Christmas party, a trip back east, and other events from the previous months, with interruptions coming from the things that are going wrong on her terminal screen. The interaction with these 3 files constitute the middle game as described by Kendall. But what of the end game? As stated by Harpold, any ending will be marked by the punctuality of interruption. Thus, the purest paradigm of a hypertext ending, you can just stop reading, decide that you have had enough, get up from your computer, and walk away. Each lexia can stand alone or be carried through to additional lexia to complete a larger narrative. The endgame can be as far as you are willing to go, however deep into the hole you are willing to chase the rabbit. Our experience is dilated after its initial compression. Time is shifted from finite to infinite. This sort of inconclusion, or reader-decided conclusion, can also be seen in Automation, a generative poem by Andrew Campana. Every 8 seconds, a script that follows the common syntax of a train announcement is generated with a random number, subject, verb, and exhortation from a preset list. The initial screen when opening the link to this poem is a looped video of commuters on a train, which seemingly invites the reader to ride with them on a rail that never ends as the poetic lines are generated in chaotic succession. We can choose whatever platform we see fit for an exit, or we can keep riding forever. Abraham Avnisand's Collocations, a piece designed for tablet computers, explores the disruptive implications of quantum mechanics for science, philosophy, and literature. The reader manipulates their devices, position, or momentum to allow for poetic text to appear within Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein's debates. As the user manipulates their device, the original text begins to vibrate and poetic subtexts are formed. Balancing a set of predetermined text with those that are randomly generated, we are given two texts to understand, both equally abstract. The text itself dilates and compresses as our interpretation does the same. Each of the texts included in this presentation hold a certain degree of chaotic elements, with some being more controlled than others. The chaos may be intentional or it may be inherent, but it is chaotic nonetheless. The apparently random states of disorder are subject to some level of deterministic law, some governance of an initial condition. These initial conditions are broad, open for user interaction or user interpretation. The compression or dilation of experience is determined by chaos, controlled by an observer's lack of control. As we progress through a piece of electronic literature, their experience nears but never reaches conclusion.